So our agenda for the evening, folks, is we will have Nono's presentation up until about 7:30, and then we'll save some time for Q&A there at the end. And for those who aren't familiar with Agile Austin's mission, here it is. I'll read it out loud as well. We connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events, which educate our community on uncovering better ways to deliver value through Agile values, principles, and practices. And couldn't do it without all of our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor, Agile Velocity. We also have gold sponsors, silver sponsors, and bronze sponsors. So big shout out to all of these companies. And then this is a summary of all the different SIG meetups over the course of each month. I always like to call out, if you want a screenshot of this, please hit up Erin or myself, because it's really helpful to see it broken down this way, so you can make sure to kind of plan your month around all of the different SIGs. So most of you know who we are, but just in case you don't, my name's Brittany Durden. That is Erin Randall. Couldn't do this without Erin. She does so much of the heavy lifting to make this coaching SIG what it is. And so for that, I am very, very grateful. And all of y'all should be very, very grateful for everything that she does. And we're here to help y'all. So hit us up if you ever need anything, have questions, whatever it is. One extra thing that I wanted to call out while we're anchored on this slide is that the company that I work for, UShip, which is based in Austin, Texas, we are actually hiring a senior Scrum Master. And so if anyone on this call is interested in that position or knows somebody that maybe would be interested, please let me know. Feel free to email me here or connect with me on LinkedIn. And so our mission, Erin and I's mission as Agile Austin Coaching SIG, is to create a learning experience that allows Agilists to connect with one another, builds a community, and ultimately helps Agilists improve their coaching skills. And so another reminder that we meet the first Monday of every month. Pre-COVID, we were meeting in person at UShip, but we're doing the virtual thing, and it's been working really, really well. Because people from Africa get to present and join, and it's great. So with that, I'm going to pass the virtual mic to Erin. Take it away.
Well, see, and I want to call out Brittany for doing all of the behind the scenes work that makes so much what happens here possible as well. So this isn't just, me. This is really a team effort between Brittany and myself, and frankly, everybody in this community who makes this meetup possible. Honestly, we couldn't do it without Agile Austin. We couldn't do it without our sponsors, but mostly we couldn't do it without all of you. Because I see you guys chime in every single month. You come in with this and you've got great questions and feedback and curiosity. Just kind of behind the scenes as well. We do want about 25% of our sessions to be people who are first-time speakers. So we are always looking for people who are wanting to, get their feet wet on what it's like to present at one of these SIGs, and we're happy to help. And we do try to, we'd like to get more people in Austin back as well, because that is our local home, believe it or not. It's not just virtual. But what do we have coming up? July will be Ethics within Agile Coaching with Sydney Markle. Sydney actually is here in Austin, but she has done a lot of work with IC Agile and Shane Hasty on really setting that great foundation for ethics within the profession of Agile coaching. So I'm very much looking forward to this, and I hope that you all are as well. August will be Rebecca Colwell and integral facilitation. So Rebecca does a lot of work with a company called 10 Directions. And these are, very advanced skills for people who do a lot of facilitation. I did some of the early work for this integral facilitator path. And it really has helped me to ask better questions, to hold space better within the environment. So that one should be good as well. And then up in September, as we start back with the autumn, is Lisa Bradburn, and she is going to be talking about developing your coaching presence. And Lisa is actually trained as a psychotherapist as well, but she, I believe, did the enterprise coaching cohort with Carrie Sudi So did that work there as well. So really kind of that broad presence and how to help you develop that stronger coaching work there. So that's what we have coming up this later, let's just call it that. But tonight is Nono Donsa, and she is coming to us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. She is going to be talking about the environmental impact of culture and bias in the workplace. So I met Nono on LinkedIn, and she really is just a lovely person, lovely presence, and I've seen a lot of her work over the past year. And so when we were talking about getting broader appeal, this is one of the women that I approached, and she said, I really want to do some work around bias. So I said, hey, you know what? We've got June open. And she said, yes. So with that, Nono, I'm going to turn it over to you. But please know that we are very much looking forward to this. So thank you.
Yay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Quickly, before we start, I have received some feedback that sometimes my microphone fades away. When that happens, please let me know. When I'm in presentation view, your faces get really, really small. So I mean it, if you do this, I won't see, but if you do this, I might see. Okay. So I'm really just hoping this is going to be more conversational rather than an actual presentation. Just getting my tech ready. But like Erin has already said, we're going to be looking at the impact of culture in our work environments. Now, this presentation was specifically prepared for the Scrum Master Summit. The reason I'm sharing that is that you'll find that some of the language, as an example, I'm going to be talking about developers. So the definition for this context of the word developers is as per the Scrum Guide, which would be people who are actually doing the work. So if anybody here is not a Scrum Master, please feel free to pop some questions into the chat if I need to clarify anything. Now, just quickly, the reason my interest was piqued around this topic is really like Erin and Brittany have already said. One of the changes that have been brought about by the pandemic is that we now have access to people we otherwise might not have met. I mean, case in point, today I am speaking in Texas in the US, and previously I might have had to fly there. So the financial barriers and the geographic barriers have also then been removed. But this has come with interesting nuances, right? The people we interact with are from various cultures, they have different norms, and all of this is starting to show up in our interactions. So it's very, very, very important that we learn to acknowledge, to recognize, and anticipate that the people we are interacting with now are not the usual crowd, and they come with their baggage, they come with their assumptions, they come with their norms. So it is interactions like we are meeting now. We are now working with distributed teams. We are working with virtual teams. As Agile coaches and Scrum Masters, we are having to create teams. So in the creation of those teams, we can't carry on as if it's business as usual. We're going to be working with people from different countries, and we need to anticipate that these people are going to be coming with their norms and their cultural nuances, I suppose. So the intention of this talk is really just to awaken your senses around what is happening currently, but also to talk and start the conversations around, so what do we do? How do we make people feel welcome? How do we build high-performing teams? How do we build diverse high-performing teams? So if you forget everything I've said this afternoon for you, I want you to just remember 3 things. The first is anticipate now with our new normal that as you're starting to form new teams, there will be cultural differences and nuances that come with the people in those teams. We weren't all raised in the same family by the same parents. So even if your team is not distributed, the fact that it's different people, anticipate that those cultural differences are going to be coming. Be sensitive to these cultural differences as they arise, but also observe the impact that they have on the team and also individuals within the team. And lastly, respond. So the response is going to be context specific. Some responses might just be, how do you teach the team to harness the power that comes with this diversity? Some responses are going to be, how do you train people to be kind and to recognize these and to tap into these, to access that diversity that exists? Now, we're talking about the impact of culture in terms of how we are forming teams. And therefore, I think it's important that we look at the definition of the word culture itself. So what is culture? And I found an awesome definition. I really just want to read it to you quickly. I'm going to be revisiting the wording so that I'm hoping some of the concepts and some of the words stick, so that from here on going forward, every time I use the word culture, this definition comes to mind. So a quick definition is a pattern of shared basic assumptions that are learned by a group as it solved its problems. These assumptions worked well enough to be considered valid, and therefore as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to whatever it is that was being solved at that particular time. Now, the words I want you to remember is a shade of basic assumptions. Now, these assumptions were tested and they worked well, and as a result, they were taught to the next generation of a specific culture or people group. And then just simply put, culture is the ideas, the customs, and social behavior of a particular people group in society. So now culture differs from place to place and person to person. People within the same city, within the same geographic group, from the same race can have different cultures. Because remember, we're saying that it's learned behavior. So you need to be in the same environment to learn that these assumptions that you have worked, and therefore you guys will teach it to the same, to the next generations. Now, just some interesting observations that I have seen in my teams with regards to culture, and some of the stereotypes which I have seen, but interestingly had some truth in them. So in the African and the Asian culture, when you speak to someone who is of higher regard, you tend not to look them in the eye. You do that because it's a sign of respect and it's a sign of you being humble, right? Whereas in the Western culture, not looking at someone in the eye could be seen as dishonest and withdrawn. Something interesting that I've also seen in my teams, the traditional gender roles. Also think about your teams. I'm not sure if you share the same experiences, but women tend to organize team lunches and the men will organize the team building sessions. Something interesting as well is in Norway, for example, socialization takes place in a framed and structured environment. Whereas in South Africa, chatting to a stranger is completely normal, right? Now, all of these examples, if you take them and you insert them in a team context, if you think about how we used to work previously, if you take someone from Africa or Asia who might not look a superior in the eye, and you put them in a work environment, if you take your traditional gender roles, someone who might be from that culture, and you put them in your previously normal work environment, and you bring a guy from Norway and you put them in the same office and you try to form a team, wouldn't there be some value in acknowledging and recognizing some of these stereotypes? I acknowledge, but hold some fundamental value in them and are to a certain extent possibly true. So these are just the patterns that I have observed in my teams. Now, one needs to be pretty woke to recognize and understand these stereotypes while suspending judgment. Now, I've used that word woke, and in delivering this talk once or twice, I found that the word itself invokes some emotions in people. So I want us to quickly unpack what that means, the word woke, for the context of this discussion. So if we take it back to the history of the word, it is a term that refers to the awareness of social issues and concerns of social justice. This word is typically from the African American vernacular. This word has also been used loosely across the globe. So it's also associated with movements like Not in My Name, Me Too, all of those political movements. But for the context of this conversation, I want you to drop your understanding of the word and adopt the South African understanding of the word, or at least how it used to be perceived before these movements. The word woke here in South Africa really just used to mean streetwise, street smart. So as an example, if you are a 45-year-old female and you use the word touche and you're speaking to a 16-year-old, if you understood what the word means and you used it in the correct context, you might be woke, right? No political association. So when we talk about woke for the purposes of this presentation, it really just means street smart. Okay. So I want to share an experience that I had in one of my teams that really made me realize that in order to be an awesome Scrum Master or Agile coach, I need to learn how to be woke. I had arrived at a new job. I was excited and starry-eyed. You'll be thrown into the deep end, I was told. Man, I love it. I love a challenge. So this is exactly what I was hoping to hear. I was the first to arrive of the Scrum team, and upon my arrival, I was escorted to my desk. My plan of action for that day was really simple. First day, don't know the people, don't know the environment, so just observe. When the whole team had arrived, the Scrum Master mentioned that this day was the day of the retrospective. And with my experience as the incoming team coach, he was pretty confident I would be able to facilitate the event objectively. This was especially important to him because he wanted to participate in the retrospective. And he was explicit. He said that his facilitator's hat was off. How hard could it be, right? Not exactly what I had planned, but I got my mental retrospective template ready. Set the stage, gather data, gather insights, create actions, and wrap up. The venue was booked and confirmed, tick. The Scrum team arrived, tick. The setting of the stage went well. It is in the data gathering part of this retrospective where things really started to go south. The team itself was as diverse as can be. There were men and women, all 5 racial groups as defined by Stats South Africa. These would be Black, White, Indian, Colored, and other. And there was a mixture of tribes within 2 of the 5 racial groups. There was Xhosa and Zulu from the Black population. There was a Telugu and a Tamil person from the Indian population. Now, one of the interactions that will be etched in my memory forever was between myself and a male colleague. He had made a statement, and in my quest to get to the why, I asked some clarifying questions. I was looking him in the eye as a sign of focused listening and respect. But he seemed to get more and more agitated with every question. Now, it's only after a couple of weeks, after getting better acquainted with the team, that I came to learn that he was from a people group, culture, remember that definition, where making eye contact as a sign of a challenge. Now, the fact that I'm a woman and I was standing, and he himself was a male and he was sitting, my standing position made me appear physically larger, and him sitting made him appear like he was yielding. These were some of the cultural discrepancies that were creeping through and contributing directly to him being so rash and irritable. Now, when I reflect back on that particular incident, one of the learnings is that the application of the first Agile value statement, which is individuals and interactions over processes and tools, goes deeper than just the spoken word and body language. I had an experience, I inspected, and I reflected on what had happened. And I was on a journey to coach this specific team, this diverse team that I had described to you now. After understanding where that male colleague was coming from, I realized it was going to be important to give people language, but also to have the team anticipate, recognize, and respond to the cultural diversity that we all come with. Now, on a practical note, what did I do? Because now I had this information. I understood why this male colleague reacted the way he did. I didn't necessarily agree with it, and it was possibly not going to be the last time it had happened. What were we going to do if we wanted to build a high-performing team with all these differences that we had in this team? Now, practically speaking, I had a look at the Scrum Values, and I thought this would be a useful tool for me to coach the team and to give the team language so that when we see things that aren't working, when we need to address one another, what words are we going to use so that we are constructive, but also so that everybody understands where we're coming from and what we're trying to do. So it was important to me that we recognize that we're different, but it was also important that these differences don't make other people feel small, less important, or insulted. So we were going to have to find a way to work together. I facilitated a team lift-off. And as a team, we had a look at at each of these values. And we decided that we wanted to agree what would each and every value in action look like. So as an example, if you take the value courage, courage in action would be that each team member would speak up when they felt uncomfortable during a discussion or an activity. The team also agreed that their actions and interactions would be based on respect. The team was committed to creating a work environment where all team members were equal. And this would then foster an environment where everybody could be open around their feelings, their observations, and their reservations. The team's interactions and their intentions were not only to focus on the deliverables alone, but to work towards creating a healthy team dynamic. So defining those values and actions really would have helped, and it really did help give the team the language. When we could see someone was uncomfortable, a team member could either have the courage to speak up and say that they are observing this person feeling uncomfortable, or the person who was uncomfortable would have to have the courage to speak up and discuss why they were being uncomfortable. Now, these values give direction to the Scrum team with regard to their work, their actions, and their behavior. Just want to say that one more time. It's verbatim exactly as per the Scrum Guide. It says, these values give direction to the Scrum team with regards to their work, their actions, and their behavior. So this was really going to be the blueprint for this team in terms of how we wanted to behave. And when things weren't working, how do we get back to that which we said we want? Now, as a Scrum Master, this experience taught me a couple of things. The first is a good Scrum Master is culturally woke, street smart, and does two things. As a bare minimum, have some awareness of the cultural diversity that exists within your team and organization. Even if this is outside of your experience, as a first step, at least develop the curiosity and start learning more. The second thing, take the time to understand some of the obvious biases that could exist in the team, the impact of these biases on the team, but also the impact of these biases on individual members within those teams. Now, that is a good Scrum Master. The woke Scrum Master gets well versed on the stereotypes that could be projected on the different people groups within the team and helps the team to recognize these stereotypes and how to deal with these. Now, every time I think back on that interaction I had with that male colleague, a personal reflection to me was, in that moment, as I was asking those clarifying questions, as I was looking him straight in the eye, trying to get to the why, as I was observing him get more and more irrational and irritated, the reality is I was also starting to formulate assumptions of my own. I was somewhat also deciding, based on my cultural background, why I thought he was behaving the way he does. So what was important to me and what I took away from that experience was that I saw his feedback through my cultural glasses as well. And to share what those cultural glasses were, he was male, I'm female. I thought we are dealing again with another case of a male-dominated IT industry. We were from different racial backgrounds. I'm from the African background and he was Indian. And based on my experiences, based on the Indian gentleman that I might have interacted with in the past, I felt that my contribution was being viewed as less than because I am a woman. So the reason I'm sharing this is, even though I was observing that behavior as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, as you observe and you look for these cultural differences and these stereotypes, also have that self-awareness that you're also going to be seeing through your cultural glasses. Now, how to put down those cultural glasses is a conversation on its own. So I want you to think back in your teams. Think back of an interaction that might have happened between yourself and a team member, yourself and a colleague. And really just take the time to reflect. One, recognize your own cultural glasses. How are you viewing that interaction? And two, did you take the time to consider the cultural background that that colleague or person is coming from? That's it. Thanks, Erin. Thanks, Brittany.
It would have been helpful if I'd asked you when your final slide was going to be. So everyone, if I could invite you all back on camera now. I was trying to save bandwidth for people. No, we do have a few different questions over in the chat, if you want to get ready for those. So the
Yep.
first one, and I believe this was from Sherry, was Nono, how did you find out, or how could you have known these hidden cultural meanings with new colleagues?
It's interesting. Someone asked me the exact same question. So in an ideal world, when you get to know your team, I said my position was really just to observe, right? So had I been given the time to actually just observe and get to know the people, I might have picked up on some of them, not all of them. But the reality is, how often have you walked into a new job and you're already expected to facilitate and drive and make things happen, right? So ideally, I would say in an ideal world, it would be through working agreements, observations. Once you get to know the people, you will facilitate a couple of sessions before you get to know your colleagues. There, you're probably going to be going in blind, but your job is to pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up. The next session, you know more. The next session, you know more. But the truth is, now you get thrust into a new position and you need to facilitate a retrospective, and you need to hold an audience, and you need to hope that you're aiming correctly at the correct audience and that your body language is perceived accurately. I think something that I might have done differently, and something that I did learn from the previous time, and also during that interaction with that colleague, the more aggressive he got, the gentler I became. And the language I used was stating my intent. So I'd ask a question and he'd get irritated, and then I modified my language. I would say, I am looking to understand this. I am therefore asking that. Just so that at least I could appear as if I was not armed.
Yeah, I hear you modeling transparency really well there. I'm trying to understand this. I'm going to be modeling this. Wow. That takes a lot of wherewithal. Well done, you. I have another question here. No, for people who stonewall or who are passive aggressive, what is your approach to discovering culture for people whose pattern of coping is shutting down or avoidance tactics?
I think a lot of responsibility gets placed onto the Scrum Master's shoulder, right? So a lot that I've heard is give it to the team. So I don't mean give it to the team and say this person is stonewalling. I think train the team to observe, ask some questions, and when there are those people who stonewall, the job of the Scrum Master is not to try break down those walls. Create an environment where the rest of the team members, those who are willing to engage, when they start to create that environment, in my experience, that person will soften up, and sometimes that person will want to do something different. And that something different could be joining another team. That something different could be implementing something that doesn't require as much engagement with the team. But I really just want to say, what I'm trying to say is, it's not the Scrum Master's role to uncover where the history of people, where they come from, how they grew up, etc. The Scrum Master's role is to ask those questions. The Scrum Master's role, once you have that awareness, is through social engagement. Just start a random conversation. I am from here, and this is maybe what we do. I'm sorry I responded this way. This is why. Erin, I noticed that you weren't looking at me when I was doing this. Is everything okay? And you might say, no, everything is perfectly normal. And I could be thinking, well, I thought you would look. And you would say, yeah, I was just trying to be respectful.
So I hear bravery on your part then in being open about what you're doing and why, and then hoping.
You also get, sometimes I feel a lot gets taken away from me personally as a Scrum Master, because sometimes I have to get so vulnerable in front of the team that I almost feel naked. And when the team doesn't reciprocate, I feel exploited, right? So I've then had to learn to also draw personal boundaries. How much am I going to be giving to the team? And what happens if the team doesn't give back?
Wow.
Yeah, that definitely gets me thinking.
Yeah, I was saying Mike's agreeing with Nono that being woke it's more effective with stakeholders and customers alike. Wow. So everyone, I know that Nono was also hoping that this would be a conversation amongst all of us. So please don't be shy. You can come off mute on camera and we can talk with one another. What's coming up for us here? You know, when you were talking about going in with a new team and facilitating a retrospective, that would have been a challenge in any sense, but then picking up, you had 5 different groups really there that were being represented. And it sounds like you did come in with a lot of humility and softness.
I did, but there were also females in the group. And I didn't want to come across as if, so again, remember my cultural lenses, and I'm not saying this is what the gentleman was necessarily projecting, but what I was reading, I'm a female and I'm trying to facilitate a session, and this male is being aggressive. So I didn't want to model the behavior to the females that this was okay. So I wanted to be humble, but I also wanted to have boundaries and draw the line, which I also think is maybe what perpetuated the behavior. By drawing a line, to me that looked as follows. I didn't stop asking the questions. I just rephrased them and I took on a softer tone. But it was important to me that I not stop the questions so that I give in to what I was seeing, because I felt it might have been modeling behavior. Remember, I said that you also need to assess the impact of the cultural differences on the other members of the team. So it was important to me then that I not appear as if I think it's okay that women should maybe not facilitate, or that women should ask less questions, or that women should appear yielding. I didn't think that was okay. I could have been wrong because I didn't know the people. And again, I was wearing my cultural lenses as well.
I hear so much self-awareness and self-management in what you're doing as well. Really, that takes an incredible amount of wherewithal to do. Also, my mother's about to start feeding dogs. I'm going to go on mute.
Yeah.
I had a question.
I asked.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Me? I'm audible? Oh,
Yep, we
okay.
can hear
I
you,
didn't
Joe.
see the little
Yeah.
box. Like, I had a question. So, a lot of my team were distributed across the ocean, and our working from home and technology is difficult. So, video is not an option for many of them. And so, in the absence of that, there are fewer opportunities for me to really kind of observe reactions, physical reactions that people have to my words. And so, I'm wondering if there are particular questions that you would recommend that I ask to help break the ice or to uncover some of those biases?
I think remote working has really introduced a spanner to the works, because part of communication is through body language, right? But then also part of assuming that you understand what body language means could also be quite deceiving. So what's worked for me, and I can't say it's worked 100% because I'm thinking specifically of a particular individual I've really been trying to get to know, is to have conversations outside of the formal team structure. Literally just check in, hey, how are you doing? Sometimes the guy who doesn't switch on the camera in a team structure switches on the camera when it's just the two of us. And the intent is not to talk about work, because we've all been dealing with the pandemic. Again, I've really had to get really naked in front of the teams just to get a little bit out of them. So I would call to find out. Firstly, I had to admit to having had lost someone to COVID. And once or twice I've had to cry so that the team can actually realize that this is happening. But then asking personal questions within boundaries. Is anybody, or are you nursing anyone at home? And the reason for the question is not because I'm curious about who you're nursing. I'm curious because that will have an impact on your work, right? I might not be able to get a hold of you. You might be constantly late for sessions. So it's really getting to know, do you have kids at home? Are they homeschooling? Are your parents with you? So it's really through that where you get to just sneak peek into the person. But absolutely, the virtual world has made it a little bit harder to get to see people. And sometimes even asking those questions people don't switch the camera on, but at least you have an idea of the setting and what they might be dealing with. Doesn't necessarily speak to culture, but it at least brings you closer to viewing who they are.
I had a question as well. Um, Hello, Nono.
Hi,
So I know that a lot of our personality dictates how we interact with people, our nurture and our nature, what we grew up with and what we were born with. Um, but one thing that I really notice about you is you have a very calm demeanor. Your very voice, your essence, the essence of who you are is just very zen. And it will immediately help someone, help a team to kind of feel relaxed and safe. Are there ways that you can recommend to people to kind of help them bring their energy down? Because I'm a more, well, not really high strung, but I guess, in comparison, I'm a little more passionate, a little more animated, and not everyone takes that well. So, are there methods or tools that you can recommend to just kind of be more centered and calm to better present to people?
I have a question rather than an answer, Dana. Is it important to be calm? So the reason I ask is I might understand the need for calmness in specific contexts, but the questions that I get from Scrum Masters mostly is sometimes they want to change themselves, and I want to protect that as well. So because people are different and we all want to please our teams, right? Sometimes we need to be calm. Sometimes you need to get some delivery out of people. So I don't want to give a formula. I want to acknowledge that sometimes it's necessary, but I also want to put on the table that I worry that Scrum Masters are trying to change themselves to become something else to accommodate the team, right? I think the team owes it to themselves and the Scrum Master for people to be able to be themselves as well. But from a how do I stay calm perspective, I'm not calm, Dana. Before this call, I was stalking Erin and I was testing stuff and I was making sure my audio was there. I think I appear calm because I'm actually focusing and trying to stay calm. But this is not natural. It's like a duck. I'm calm at the top and my feet are doing this at the bottom, trying to stay afloat.
So, Dena, and it is Dena. Am I pronouncing that
Dina.
correctly?
It's Dina.
Dina, sorry, Dina.
No,
I
it's
also
okay.
asked Carrie Sudi to come online. I hope you finished dinner, Care, because I think you're starting to reference, self as instrument here on this. So, Carrie, do you want to chime in on that part?
Sure. And I was getting my dinner out of the oven. But anyway, I guess one of the things that I'd bring up about self as instrument, and I don't know if it necessarily applies here, but something we explore is how we can be a instrument for change, how we can be an instrument for aware, not just self-aware, like the self-awareness that we bring, but the awareness that we can create in others and how they reflect and see each other through maybe the catalyst that we are for that group and in that group moment. And I don't know if that is, sorry, Erin, I was getting dinner when you pinged me and I was like, oh, come on. And I'll talk about self as
Like Carrie.
Where we were going with it.
No, I think you're getting right to the heart of it. So I do think that awareness that Nona was referencing it, not only of self, but what the team is going through. I think that is important. There are times that you want to bring more energy to a situation, but there are also times that you really want to use your voice or your very presence to help, balm, be the balm to a rather, thorny situation. But what Nona's talking about being woke to that, I think that references that side as well, is listening, to your team and being open to what they're transmitting and sensing what's there for them. But you're right, Nono does have a beautiful voice for that work. I mean, you can imagine stuff's going sideways, nobody's got anything going on, there's arguments, and Nono's going to come in and it's like everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, with her.
I think another thing, I don't know how everyone feels about this, something else I'll bring is that each of us, something that I think is important that we remember is when we stand in courageous authenticity, then we stand in who we are. And Nono has that beautiful calming presence. Someone else may have and bring in a different characteristic or a different style that is also a catalyst for change and can help bring a group together, whether maybe they're more passionate or more, I don't know if excited is the right word, but just a different characteristic. And so the beauty is in standing, I think, in your own authenticity, because then you shine through that. And people can see and resonate with you because they see in you that you're being truly authentic, that it's you.
Mhm.
You're bringing your full self there in the hopes that they will do the same with you. And you're then showing that vulnerability and that courageousness of being who you are and whatever that looks like. And that can be beautiful too. Anyway.
No, I loved your,
Well said.
I'm sorry, I spoke over someone.
Oh, I was just saying, well said. And then I think someone else spoke up at the same time. So go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I was just going I mean, so I don't do Agile, right? I do coaching and facilitation. And I was just wondering, as you were looking at different ways to read people, a tool that I really like, that I use a lot, is something called social identity. So it's like, who are we in our essence? How does society name us? And then what are the identities we have chosen? And having kind of people do that ahead of time. And you always think about, what are the things I need to tune up, like do more of? And what are the things that I need to do less of? Or parts of my identity I might need to tone down a bit. And I found that really useful because, I mean, I'm here, I've been working on the continent for 15 years, living here. I arrived not being a youth. Nono will get that, meaning I was over 35. And before I came to Kenya, I was working with a lot of youth, right? But I cannot relate to the experience of young people here, even though I now have children growing up here. So I had to become people who helped other people work with youth, right? I had to actively take on a different piece, and I had to, take on an adultness that I didn't have before I arrived here, right? I couldn't say I'm with you, even it doesn't ring authentic. So it's like this idea of being authentic to yourself, but also acknowledging, are there parts of your identity that you need to do more with, tune up more, or tune down? And it could be many different things. It could be women. It could be, I think we underestimate education, where people got educated. I hear people talking here at, different places people they've studied with, that becomes a source of belonging and or exclusion. I think it's useful to just really name some of that and get out of, it's not so binary, or, it's not just the classic sense of bias. I think there's a lot more to it. And I just feel like we could, open it up, but make it less about more obvious areas of difference, perhaps. That's just thinking out loud there on one cup of coffee.
And Brittany, I think I spoke over you as well. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just wanting to follow on after Carrie and say that was just a really great summary. And then now Kathy as well. Thank you for sharing that. I really love what you just summarized too. So much of everything we're covering, I don't know, this is one of the Q&A sessions that has been more of a conversation, and it's really, really great. I know we've kind of gotten down to a smaller group here in the last 15 minutes, but this is awesome. Thank you all for engaging. I'm not trying to wrap up per se, but I just wanted to share that this is super great.
So, no, I've got I don't know if it's a question to the whole group, I guess, is I understand what you're talking about. It's really helped me kind of open my eyes to some things that I might have been missing. But and I think the piece you said earlier, I know I'm kind of rambling, but the piece you said earlier around like that person who saw you as a challenge, and you're like, yep, I might be challenging you and I might understand what you're doing eventually, but you thinking that it's not appropriate for me to do this role is not right. So there's some cultural things that people have, but actually they're not necessarily really appropriate for the workplace. So do you have any thoughts around that? And like, is it everything okay, or is some things just not okay? And how you might, you know, how you might counter those things.
So for someone to know, so remember I said that you might be, so you'll observe the team and the impact that the various cultural aspects or the cultural norms that people bring, the impact that will have on the team itself, but also individuals within the team. And then also for us specifically in this context, we used the values so that you could give people language. If I have courage to speak up, if I'm uncomfortable in a situation because I am observing someone exhibit specific behavior, and as far as I'm concerned, it's unacceptable, then again, when you leave it to the team, I don't mean dump it on the team and hope they take care of it, but by giving the team the language so that hopefully somebody in the team has the courage to say, I am uncomfortable in this interaction.
Right.
And then the question would be, oh, but why? So the answer might be because this is how I feel, or I'm observing every time I do this, you respond in this way. So the reason for that is one, so that the Scrum Master doesn't have to play policeman. You give the team language, clean language, so that they're able to have the conversations themselves. And when the team is not, maybe one of my mentors says, what is the words escape me? But trying to resolve conflict in a, okay, I'm going to leave that train of thought. The word is not coming, but giving the team language so that the team can solve the problems, unskilled expression of a valid concern.
Right.
So if someone starts to yell and scream, so if that person doesn't show skill, as a Scrum Master, you will still validate their concern, but then you teach them the skill by modeling it.
Yeah. So Mike,
Does
what
it
was
somewhat,
coming,
go Erin?
I was kind of building, I think, on what you were talking about, the phrase that I've used before, you know, so the story I'm telling myself is, or can you help me understand, giving that softening to either a question is sometimes a doorway as well. And that might be useful. And, you know, no, I was thinking back, you know, in hindsight, you know, I was being judgmental and critical. I'm thinking to a past interaction with a person where it might have been cultural what was coming up, but it was really rubbing me the wrong way. And I could hear myself in my head going, dude, you know, what's with this? And trying to tamp it down. But if I leaned into some of this and being like, okay, what's, you know, been more curious and less judgmental. But yeah. Mike, would that be helpful? Kind of a phrase like that, you know, the story I'm telling myself is, or can you help me understand, you know, or
yeah, and I've used some of that to an extent before. I'm not really being as articulate as I need to be around what I'm trying to say. So let me have a think. I'll let it percolate in my mental multi-story and it'll come out.
probably right after we end the call is when it will come out. It's
2
gonna be
o'clock
like,
in the morning, I'll jump up in bed and go, I wanted to say that.
I see William has his hand up.
William.
Evening. Thank you for staying up so late for us.
Anytime.
I was consulting with a colleague and she had the problem of the combative individual, and no matter what the conversation was, things were not changing. So she eventually had to pull the ripcord and get out of that situation. But I was curious, maybe there was something more she could have done. A poorly worded question. So trying to have a conversation, trying to understand where they're coming from. Is there anything more that maybe we could have done before she pulled the rip?
I'm hesitating to answer just because where I'm coming from now, COVID, working from home, I'm feeling really depleted. So the role that we play is very self-sacrificing, right? You can't be unskilled and you can't yell and scream. And so it depends. When was it? So the when is not, I'm not looking for a time. I'm just trying to say, if it's recent, I personally am struggling to pull on all the tools that we have, that we know. Everything that we're discussing here, the theory that I know, but practically my energy, where I am psychologically, the pandemic, the lockdowns, I can't walk where I am now a long road with someone as I coach them to the right behavior. My capacity is quite limited.
Yeah, we settled on, and then this is probably wrong, but we just settled on the brilliant asshole problem, and the organization wouldn't do anything about it. So she had to remove herself from that toxic environment.
Under normal circumstances, again, the role for me feels very sacrificial, because now you're expecting the scrum master or the coach to walk a journey, put aside their feelings, their perspectives, their views, to hopefully coach someone to recognize unhelpful behavior. So from a pre-COVID perspective, I would always challenge someone to walk a little bit longer, to dig a little bit deeper. The reality is we do have people who are just not helpful. But for the context of now, I think most people, capacity limited, people need to shape up quickly because we're all exhausted and we're all at the end of our tether.
Thank you.
I think that's actually, William, your question brings up I guess brings me back to the answer your question, Nono, that you asked me, of why it's important. I know it's kind of annoying when people read something, when they're reading something, they apply everything in their life to what they're reading at the moment, but I am reading Crucial Conversations. And I think that it is important to some extent for me to remain calm, because when you're trying to have a crucial conversation with someone, when you're trying to allow all these different elements that are coming in, cultural, people have issues with age, and all these different aspects of things that are coming that you have to consider. You want to make sure that you're saying what I don't want and what I do want. And in order to be able to have that perspective and be objective, you have to remain calm. Because if someone is getting upset, if they're having a bad experience and cannot articulate why they're having a bad experience, and they're depending on you to figure it out, or to be clairvoyant maybe, to pull it out of the air and just kind of help the situation, and you're also reacting to them or their energy, then neither one of us are going to arrive. None of us as a team are going to be able to arrive at a good spot. So as a Scrum Master, I'm trying to develop the skill of saying, remain calm and be objective, and learn how to find those key factors that will help me have a more crucial conversation. So yeah, I'm not sure if that makes sense to everyone else, but what he said, his wife leaving that place because of a toxic environment. I've had toxic environments before, but I think that if I had learned how to have the true crucial conversation, I could have addressed those things sooner and better, if that makes sense.
So everyone, I do have a follow-on book as well. It's called Compassionate Conversations, and it's by Diane Hamilton. And that work has been very helpful in having some of this as well. What does compassion mean here? So I can recommend that one highly as well.
Something that comes up for me, and I don't know if it's helpful in this space, but I did the leadership profile circle assessment, and probably I've done it twice. The first time I did it, one of the pieces of feedback I got were that I placed my personal expectations on others. So I'm looking at you thinking, how come you're not doing all these things that I expect you to do that may or may not meet what your expectations of what you're supposed to be, we're mismatched. I'm placing my expectations on you of what I want and what I assume you're going to be doing. And the story that was shared with me that has always resonated and really helped me think about some of those tougher conversations. And mind you, I also have been in some of those toxic places where you find your boundary and you find what you're willing to deal with and when you're not and you're ready to move on. But in those moments where I'm faced with frustration or things happening, especially in COVID, working with people who maybe react in ways that I'm not expecting, the story shared was there's a story of a man, maybe it's like a 2-lane highway and you can't pass. And you are trying to get somewhere and you're behind a car that's going 15 miles per hour in a 65 or something. I'm making up numbers here. And you're frustrated. This car is not moving any faster and you have somewhere to get and you can't pass. And they're going slow and they're going slow and they're going slow. And at some point in time, they pull over to let you pass and you decide to stop to see what's going on. Let's just envision this is a world where we might do that. And the gentleman gets out of his car, or a woman, but let's say it's a gentleman in this case, in this story. And you say, is everything okay? Or what's going on? And they tell you their daughter is getting married and something happened to the cake maker who couldn't bring the cake to the wedding. And this is dad, and he's got daughter's wedding cake in the trunk of his car, scared to death it's going to fall over. And he is in the car driving so slow. And that's why. And the reason why I share that story is because we don't know what's going on in someone else's life. We make assumptions based on our own biases and what we're looking for and what we're wanting and where we're wanting to get to and how we're wanting to get there, forgetting that the other person or the other people on that team, they have their own. And the more that we can create that space of empathy and compassion, as well as shared understanding, and as well as what we'll stand for and what we won't, I think that's what can really bring out true connections in teams where you can reach places where teams can really bond and do amazing things together. But having that empathy and that recognition that in your moment, you're like, I'm gonna get there. In his moment, he's like, I'm gonna protect this cake for my daughter. And you're two different places and thinking about things in two different ways and creating that shared understanding, creating that conversation, that crucial conversation, that compassionate conversation.
I love that. I'm just thinking if I had no tools and I didn't know any different and I arrived at this country in this country, I think with kindness, you might get away with that. Would buy you time as you get to know the people, regardless of what's happening. If the response for me, based just trying to summarize what Kerry has said, if you could just use kindness as a fuel for 3 months as you get acquainted with these people in this new country, you have no idea what's going on. People are running, people are yelling, people are screaming, you're getting screamed at some stage. That's going to be addressed because there's a boundary there, but for now you don't know what's going on. I think with kindness, that would be fuel that could carry you for a while you get your bearings.
Yeah. Positive intent, kindness, heart. If we bring all of those things, wow. Well, y'all, I'm mindful of time and also doubly mindful of the fact that for Nono, it is very, very early in the morning at this point, and she has 2 small children. So with that in mind, does anyone have any last minute follow-up requests, anything like that question? Because if not, I'm going to, number one, I think Mike has it right there. Really, Nono, this was wonderful. Thank you. Not just the work you did for the presentation part, but the conversation we had afterward. Beautiful. So thank you for that. And everyone, I do encourage you to find Nono on LinkedIn. Follow her there, connect with her, and I hope connect with lots of other people too, because we need to have more voices in these types of conversations, not less. So if you can bring that, we would be deeply appreciative. So with that, Nono, we are going to let you go back to bed or go to bed. With that, next month, we will be having Sydney Markle here to talk about ethics within Agile coaching. So we hope to have you back there as well.